We'll call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of March 3rd, 2014. We'll note that all commissioners are present for the meeting, and the first item of business is the order of business. I've been informed that item 4A, the water service contract between the city, Southwest Water, and the state of North Dakota, is being removed from the agenda and will be brought back at the next meeting.
Just at a future date. It might be a month or two.
Okay. Are there other changes to the order of business? Hearing none, with the change I mentioned, would the order of business be, would there be a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the second and the motion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The motion carries. Next item of business is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? Hearing none, would there be a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So we have a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll then move to the non-timetable agenda, and we'll go to 4B, finished water pump agreement. And Mr. Colling, are you presenting that?
I am, Mr. President. Mr. President, Commissioners, the agreement before you is for a joint finished water pump station. As you are aware, the finished water pump station is being designed currently by the State Water Commission and Southwest Water Authority. That is proposed to be a joint facility that would house both freshwater, potable water pumps for the city of Dickinson, as well as the remainder of Southwest Water Authority's area in which they provide service. The facility is anticipated to be approximately $10.5 million. And under this agreement, the city would bear approximately 1/2 of the cost of that facility. We would have a 50% share of the construction cost of the facility itself, as well as the costs for the city's pumps and the electrical switchgear and piping that would be required in order to finish out that facility. We have worked over the last couple of weeks with the State Water Commission and Southwest Water Authority to put this agreement together. We anticipated having item 4A available for approval today as well. However, we are still working with the State Water Commission on that agreement, particularly in the rates that will be charged by Southwest Water Authority for the industrial water sales at our water vendors. I do want to mention one other point that we are still working through with Southwest Water Authority as well, and that has to do with potential expansion sites in the event that the State Water Commission would want to expand the existing water treatment facility. There is a provision in this agreement where the city would convey a parcel of land to the east of the existing water treatment plant that Southwest Water Authority would then have in order to create a larger water treatment plant. Southwest Water Authority may also be interested in some additional property around that site, and we anticipate potentially bringing another agreement before you that would offer them a first right of refusal to some of the city-owned property surrounding the water treatment plant. I'd be happy to take any questions on this agreement. City staff do recommend approval. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Are there any comments or questions for the city attorney? If not, would there be a motion to regarding the agreement, either to approve or disapprove?
I'll move we approve the agreement.
I think Mr. Jackson beats Mr. Carson. So Mr. Jackson moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to item C, and that's an abatement hearing. Leon Malberg has asked that we consider approving an abatement.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. We have been presented with an application for abatement or refund of taxes. It has been filled out by Mr. Malberg for property located at Lot 4, Block 1, Northland First Edition. The abatement shows a 2013 tax of on the taxable value, or the tax year, I'm sorry, for 2013. True and full value of $444,500 is what we currently have on that property. The application is asking for that to be changed to $190,600. I did have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Malberg on February 24th and to perform a walkthrough at that time. We went over his property record card, and we do have it recorded adequately, I believe. Property characteristics are fairly valued. Mr. Malberg at that time did not disagree with my assessment of the property characteristics. And just a reminder that the State Board of Equalization requires us to value properties on a median value at least between 98 to 100%.
That's 90 to 100% of
True and full value.
market value?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I did have a chance to look at 3 sales of fairly similar buildings, similar quality metal buildings. All of these properties sold in 2013. One of them was 3,050 square feet, sold for $278,000. There was another property that consisted of 2 buildings totaling 10,240 square feet. That sold at $695,000. And another third sale of a 6,000 square foot metal building sold for $750,000. Property in question here has 14,600 square feet. I'm open to any questions that any of you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschfeld. Any questions for the city assessor? Okay, thank you. Mr. Malberg, do you wish to speak on behalf of this issue?
My name is Leon Malberg. I live at 941 13th Street West in Dickinson, North Dakota. I'd like to thank you for the invitation to these proceedings, specifically Mr. Hirschfeld, who did indeed send me a letter of invitation. As he said, we went through the property the first part of this, or last week, and I tried to be as unbiased as I could be. I think this was the first time he had been on the inside of the building, period. All other assessments have been made from the outside. The problem is the assessment, which took place last spring. I received a letter from the assessing department saying that it was assessed value was $444,600. I immediately came to the city building and approached the assessor, got no results. But he did tell me that it was comparable to oil field properties. And that's really the only thing I came out of the conversation with. Now, the tax statement has actually increased by 202% in the last 24 months. I've been to the city commission meeting. You people were here at the end of a session because I was not on the agenda. I've been to the county commission meetings. There doesn't seem to be any point in a citizen really raising an objection from what I can see. One of the things I observed is that within leaving the podium, both at the county and the city, within 3 steps, the meetings were adjourned. No discussion, nothing. Told to compare to oil field. I picked this up just because it was a part of the paper here, and I want to use it as a vehicle to compare my property with supposedly the oil field property that I'm being compared to. If you look at this building, which is an oil field building, it's free span. There are no interior columns. I have a set of columns down the middle, which is a lot less expensive building. If you'll notice here, a 50 or 80 ton crane that moves the entire distance of the shop area. I have no crane. On the floor, there are approved EPA sumps for doing maintenance operations. I have no sumps. In approximately 80% of oil field companies, the floor is heated. My floor is not heated. Their buildings are air conditioned. My building is not air conditioned. When UPS moved in, they required me to remove 20 tons of air conditioning. In most oil field buildings, there's 23 to 25 finished square feet, 2,500 square feet of office space, conference room, offices, bathrooms, a reception area. There are no finished space in my building, none. I have 2 Spartan bathrooms, and I mean Spartan. Most of the oil field companies have concrete parking lots for the personal vehicles of employees or visitors. The only concrete I have are the pads that are outside the door, which are 16 feet wide and 8 feet long. You can see from this picture that there are a plethora of overhead doors letting access for vehicles to be worked on. I have 2 overhead doors. These buildings also have quick heat recovery. My building has Corovac heat, which is not a quick heat recovery. It was actually put in for a grocery store, which normally doesn't have apertures open with cold air coming in. Oil field companies, 90% of them have alarm systems, both for detecting burglary type actions or fire. I have none. Now, one of the things I'd like to bring up is that it is a relatively large building, but it's 38 years old. And apparently the taxes were assessed properly for the first 35, and then all of a sudden we went crazy. Now, let me give you an example of another steel building which caught my eye. And if you watch the paper, it was a building in Hettinger. Now you say, well, what are you doing bringing up Hettinger? With the state law as it is written, whether you're in Matador, North Dakota, or Crosby, it's all supposed to be the same. Quote, in the interest of fairness. Now this building has 6,100 square feet. It's a steel building with some brick veneer, windows. It's finished on all sides, floor, ceiling, walls. It is a grocery store presently. It has a concrete parking lot. The lot is the same size as mine. It is next to Highway 12 and Airport Road, which means it has a plethora of use from the high end, such as engineering or financial advisors or insurance or real estate, or you could go all the way down to shoe repair. It has a multitude of potential uses. That is not the case with my building. What I find interesting is that I called down and I got the true and full value of this building. $101,773. And I'm on a line at $190,600? I think not. Now, going on, it looks to me like the assessment has just gone completely out of whack, and for somebody that never even been inside the building until last week. But he still came up with $444,600. I'm saying it looks to me like there's absolutely been no addition to the tax base of the city of Dickinson. But then I went and looked, and here, of course, is 6 pages. 63 lines to a page, 1 property per line, of exemptions or partial exemptions in the city of Dickinson. Now, is that the only problem? No. But I was here back in 1991 when I worked with the city commission to eliminate these exemptions, and we did it. But when a new administration come in, within 6 weeks, they were reinstalled. I don't know why. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that this overpass, which will be discussed later in the meeting, ladies and gentlemen, it is not going to add value to my property. Even Mr. Kessel has almost admitted that to me, that it will detract from the property. And oil companies are not looking to come into a large area or a populated area within the city limits. That cuts down who might be looking at my property. I guess there's just no local control of property tax. That's my assessment after meeting with city and county and park board officials. My building right now, with what is supposed to happen next year, per Mr. Hertzfield, will go up again, he's telling me. And there will be no return on that investment for me. You know, I sometimes think, and I've shared this with one of the commissioners, and it's a joke, or it was, and it's a youngster says, "Dad, I'm considering a career in organized crime." And the dad looks back from his paper and said, "Government or private sector?" That's becoming more and more true the longer we go. The only thing on the bottom, it says, "I personally would suggest government." They never go to jail. That's all I really have to say. I really think that my offer of $190,600 is adequate. It meets the needs. It has the backup of 35 years where someone besides me made the value, the mills, collected the tax. Now, all of a sudden, it seems to be completely out of control. Thank you very much.
Mr. Malberg, would you take a few questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you agree that the commission, to get to the assessed value, or the city has to determine a market value of the property?
As per state law, I think that's probably correct, yes.
Yes, I mean, that is the state law, and so we have to agree on come to a market value. And if I read your application correctly, then you are suggesting that the market value for that building is $190,600.
That is correct.
And I think in your application, I don't remember the exact number, but I think you built the building for about $160,000.
That was with the air conditioning, which was then removed, and with gas pump that was removed.
And that was 38 years ago.
When I built it, yes.
Typically, would you agree, in a good economy, real estate values tend to go up And in the last 38 years, we've had both a bad and a good economy, so I would assume during the bad economy there in the mid-'80s through, say, about the mid-'90s or late '90s, property values didn't change very much, probably in some cases went down.
That is a fact.
Yeah. But since the economy has gotten much stronger, and especially those communities that are impacted by the Bakken, would you not agree that real estate values, both residential and commercial, have escalated quite rapidly?
Well, that is indeed a fact. However, the question here is how much money should this building be generating for political subdivisions? And it's completely out of hand.
Excuse me, sir. The question is, what is the market value of the building? That's the only-
$190,600.
That's your opinion.
Well, the other number is somebody else's opinion.
Well, that's true. To back up your opinion, have you had a recent appraisal of the building?
I have not had a need, and nor have I budgeted for that expense.
So you have no appraisal?
None.
You heard Mr. Hirschfield mention, I think it was 3 recent sales of commercial buildings. Do you have comparable properties that have sold recently that you're aware of that would support your contention of the $190,600?
I just gave you one in Hettinger, because everything's supposed to be equal statewide.
No, Mr. Colin, you'll have to help us out here, but I think Mr. Hirschfield is limited to looking in the city limits for setting the market values of these properties.
That's correct, Mr. President. The way state law is written, taxes are equalized throughout the state, but that doesn't mean the market values for those properties are equalized throughout the state. The market value for a property in Dickinson may be more than the market value for a property in Hettinger, but the State Board of Equalization would have the jurisdiction over that issue.
If I may add, I discussed the interior of that building to include its completion as far as being finished. He just cited buildings and this is the price. What is inside? You know, I'm just saying that's a little bit sketchy for me.
Well, we've had several commercial purchases in the last year or so that I think is indicating that commercial property has increased fairly dramatically in our community in just the last handful of years, 2, 3, 4 years. Your property included. When you were here and appeared before us on December 16th, and we did have a discussion, you're correct, you were the last person on the agenda, and we did adjourn after you left, but while you were here, we had quite a discussion, and I remember telling you about my own personal experience with my company with a commercial building that's within the city limits that we purchased approximately 4 years ago and owned for just under 4 years. We bought the building for approximately $400,000. When the last most updated assessments came out, our assessment changed quite a bit. It went up to $540,300, and then this summer we sold the building for $1,250,000, which was 2.3 times its assessed value, and you know, just over 3 times what we'd paid for it in less than 4 years. Now, I don't know that every commercial property has done that, but I think in general commercial property has increased quite dramatically.
Would you
Wouldn't
say
agree with
that particular circumstance added to the potential false increase in my property?
I'd say what it does is it indicates what the market value is of commercial properties.
I'm not an opportunist. I'm not here to, you know, I've owned the building for 38 years and I built it. I have no intention of selling it.
Well, and that may be, and of course that's your decision whether you sell it or not, but the decision to not sell really doesn't have an impact on its market value.
Well, it looks to me like opportunism at its worst. I was hoping that this hearing would include my peers, not somebody who has a conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest?
Well, what we're trying to arrive at is what the market value of your building is. You say it's gone up $30,000 in 38 years, and you've heard at least 4 examples of buildings that have gone up significantly in a lot less years than that.
And I guess I'm telling you my opinion, you're expressing to me your opinion. Period.
Well, I have no more questions.
I guess I have just some general comments. You know, I looked back at the value of your building when you bought it, $160,000, 38 years ago in 1976. Looked back at what was the price of a stamp in 1976, and it was 13 cents. Today it's 49 cents. I will tell you that you are a victim of one of the things as a financial planner that I have to work with clients on a daily basis, and that is keeping ahead of inflation. In general, a good rule of thumb is that 3% is the general rule of thumb that you would use for inflation on a continuing basis. If for the last 38 years your building had gone with the rate of inflation, it would be assessed at $491,000, about $50,000 more than where you're at. It's actually at about 2.75%. And what you're asking for with your $190,000 is less than a 1% rate of inflation.
Have you heard of depreciation?
I have heard of depreciation, but I've also heard that if you built this building for $10.95 a square foot in 1976, to expect to replace that or build it in anywhere, Hettinger, Dickinson, anywhere for that same price, or the $12 a square foot that you're proposing is out of line. Now, in the past, as a commission, we have provided abatement for people. I can remember in recent history, we had a homeowner that was renovating their basement and turning it into an apartment, so their home would become a duplex. His stance when he came before us is that half of my house is unusable right now because I have it torn to shreds as I'm converting it to an apartment. We took that into consideration as a commission, and we did allow for a tax abatement until he could complete that project. Now, what you're coming to me and saying, and the rest of the commission, is that you think it's unfair. I have two teenage kids. I get unfair every day. What I ask them for is give me something tangible that I can work with. Is your building, has the ground settled and there's a portion of it that's no longer usable? Has the rent gone down that your leasee is paying? Has something happened that's impacted the value of your building in a detrimental effect that we are not considering? Unfair is not an argument. You have to have something tangible, like that homeowner did. And so when you look at the basics of inflation, when you look at, we have approved past abatements for other people. It's not something that we've never done before. But it's also been based on fact and circumstance and tangible things that we could quantify. When you come before us and just say that it's unfair, that's a really hard one for us to qualify with other taxpayers and agree with.
Can I ask you, what happened in the first 35 years of the 38? There seemed to be some rationale, some reasonableness, and it was city personnel that did the assessment. It was city and county personnel that made the mill calculations, and the taxes were paid. And there was no request for an abatement. for 35 years.
And one could argue that perhaps during that time, the reason that there wasn't a request is because that the assessment that you had on your commercial property was undervalued and you were feeling like it was a good deal. If I look back at my own personal home over the last few years and the property values that have been obsessed, I look back and I go, these were a little bit undervalued at sometimes when I look at my home and its characteristics and the taxes that it's paying. I also own a commercial building in town, and like you, got into that commercial building at a very good time when cost was very low. I received my recent assessment, and mine too has gone up dramatically. Unlike you, I have had a recent appraisal of my building, and my appraisal came in 30% higher than what the assessed value or fair market or full market value of that building is. I would suspect the same for your property, that if you had it appraised or if you had recently accepted a written offer on your building, that it would be substantially higher than the $444,500.
But that again is your opinion. Opinion.
But it's also my real life, because I can tell you that I just gave you a personal example of a building that I have.
I can give you a copy of this situation in Adams County. I'm saying that's comparable.
Yes, and when you compare that, you're comparing a 6,500 square foot building to a 14,600 square foot building. And so your building
But you're
is
forgetting
more-
all the amenities that go along with it and the number of uses that building has versus the uses my building has. I've been a broker for 35 years. I mean, it's not like I'm speaking from inexperience.
So, based upon your broker experience, if someone else owned that property that you now own and wanted to sell it, what would be your recommendation in terms of price that they sell it at?
I have not made that assessment,
Well,
nor
you-
do I
you-
have to.
You just, no, but you just said that you're a broker, and I would consider you an expert in real estate.
I would have to put it at what I put it at, $190,600.
I will write you out that check right now on the spot.
But I'm not selling.
No, and that's not the issue. The issue is, what is the market value?
Well, that's why I
And-
say,
and-
look at something where I have give you the particulars about the value of a building with interior finishing.
You brought one from Hettinger, Mr. Mulver.
All I'm saying is the state says it's statewide.
You heard the attorney's opinion.
I understand that. He's certainly welcome to his opinion. I'm welcome to mine.
Was that your legal opinion, Mr. Colling, or your personal opinion?
That would be my legal opinion, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one thing? I just closed on a property on February 10th, a warehouse in West Industrial Park with 7,200 square feet. The sale price, it's just a warehouse. It's not heated. There was a half bath in there, and I wouldn't even say it was a working bath, for $309,000. And that's half the size of yours.
Mhm.
That's all I'm going to say.
And Mr. Malberg, I think we all can pretty much agree that when it came to the commercial real estate market, there for a great number of years, there were not many sales in Dickinson, and those sales that we did have probably were pretty modest in size. So we had stable valuations. But with the impact of the Bakken oil development, I think certainly over the last 3, 4, maybe even 5 years now, we've seen more sales and we've seen escalating prices, and that's what's driving the market value. It's what's actually occurring here.
Well, what's driving the market value is making the property without a return because of taxes.
Well, but The city,
I'm saying there's got to be a limit to the number
the-
of dollars that a building generates.
the city is required to set the value at between 90 and 100% of market value. I think, in my opinion, the city assessor has done that. If he has missed, he has set yours too low, just like Mr. Altman's property. I think they've been conservative. That was certainly my experience on the property we sold, that it turned out that even though it had increased dramatically, it was still well below what the market was.
As far as I'm concerned, that's opportunistic, more power to you. That's not my objective.
Well, we don't have the legal right to disregard those things in the Century Code that we may not agree with. I mean, we have to set the values between 90 and 100% of market value.
Where we do have the longitude is when you come to us with a fact-based presentation of why it should be decreased. As I said, that homeowner did. That was a clear-cut case that 50% of their house was now unusable over the next year as they did the renovations. That was an easy one to look at. You're not indicating that there's unusable space or has been, you know, a large amount of damage or something that's impeding the use of the building that would have us step back and say, well, while those repairs are being made or while those alterations are being made, we need to be mindful of that. You're saying that your building is still 100% usable for the purpose that it is now being rented for, and that nothing has changed there. So what would be our position to go in and alter that amount?
Restate your question.
What extenuating circumstances are preventing you from the full utilization of your building as it currently exists so that we could warrant lowering your property value until those issues are taken care of and the building returns to its full value?
I tried to explain, and they're telling me the primary users are oil field related companies. I tried to give you a synopsis of the difference between what's in the oil patch and what my building has. I went through step by step those things that are included in their properties that are not in mine. I did remove 20 tons of air conditioning at the request of the present tenant. I did remove a gas pump and 10,000 gallon tank at the request of UPS.
So, Mr. Malberg, because it's not a typical oil field building, then you feel it's only worth $190,000?
That is correct, because I don't see any oil field company that's going to come and say, let me take a look at your building. It might have some,
Okay.
they're not going to come to that part of the city.
So you've had no oil field companies approach you?
None, absolutely none,
Have you had
it-
any recent offers on your building?
none.
You've had no recent offers?
I offered it, like I told you, back in December to UPS about 6 years ago at an even $300,000, and they told me they make money buying trucks and delivering packages.
You haven't had one of your neighbors approach you to try by your building?
Well, there's always talk, but nothing of any substance.
Not even,
Because I suggested, with respect to this overpass, with the option that showed up, that Dickinson Ready Mix should consider buying the whole corner. Pizza Hut, KX, the
so
whole works.
Did Dickinson Ready Mix approach you?
They came and said, that's not in our plan. But I kept saying, I think that may be an option that would make sense for everybody based on option one, which literally tore up Dickinson Ready Mix.
Mayor Johnson, the building I just sold was a 1976, and it was not sold to an oil company. It was a local builder. So we're not selling everything to oil companies.
Well, I'm just using that because in the discussions with the assessor, he tried to relate to me that this was comparable to oil field property, and it's not.
So, but I mean, I want to get back to Dickinson Ready Mix if we could. I think I'm hearing from you, and I want to be correct with this, is that you suggested that they look at buying you and other properties out.
I said, looking at the scheme for long-term, it would make the most sense if option one is what the city settles on.
But they were not interested in doing that.
No. First of all, they said, the church building has no value, and I said, well, you know, the land has value to you.
Well, Mr. Malberg, it's my understanding that Dickinson Ready Mix was interested to the point that they actually drew up a purchase agreement.
If it did, I do not have that in my possession.
Did you see it?
No.
Mr. Sickler, I see you're in the audience. I know you're the attorney for Dickinson Ready Mix. Can you address this issue at all? Are you willing to?
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Randy Sickler. I'm an attorney here in Dickinson, and I do represent Dickinson Ready Mix. I just stepped in just a few moments ago and caught part of the discussion. President Johnson, in response to your comments, I did represent Dickinson Ready Mix in submitting a written offer to Mr. Malberg or his wife, who's title owner to the property. I submitted that to one of the owners of Dickinson Ready Mix, who I understand submitted that to Mr. Malberg. I personally did not deliver that to Mr. Malberg.
Okay. So you wouldn't know if he actually saw it or not?
I would have no firsthand knowledge of that. It's my understanding he did, but
Okay. Well, thank you.
thank you.
Are there any comments or questions?
Mr. President, I do have a couple more questions for Mr. Malberg, if you would, please. Mr. Malberg, I'd like to go back to the latest letter to the editor you had in the paper. In particular, one of the comments you talked about this commercial building we're talking about here, and that the taxes range from $1,900 to $3,900 per year, with some ups and downs due to some questionable decisions by the city commission involving special assessment bonds. There's always questionable decisions. Will always be questioned, and being questioned from you is like being questioned from anybody else. So I take no offense to you being questionable whether we have questionable decisions. What I do want to see if you can clarify for me is, you mentioned that 2010, the taxes on this building were $2,860 after 35 years, which I agree. In 2010, the taxes were $2,860. Then you go on to say in the year 2013, the taxes were 8,642%. Can you tell me where you got that number from?
From the county auditor, and I asked her, I said, what are the actual taxes, not taking into consideration the, quote, property tax relief from the state? That's where that number came from.
Okay, so I'd like to clarify that here, since you didn't do it in your letter to the editor. Would you be okay with that?
Hmm?
The actual amount you would pay on that property, is $5,236.43. If you paid it and got 5% credit, you'd be at $4,377. Now, you're stating 8,642. If you take the 5,236 on your tax statement, and if you look under down there, the legislative tax relief that was paid, not by you, but by the state, $3,406, and you add that to the 5,236, is where you got the 8,642 number.
And that was verified by the county auditor.
Did you write out a check for $8,642, which people, according to your letter, would assume that you wrote that check out for?
No, I wrote out a check right now for the county when I protested $4,377.66.
Okay, so you took advantage of 5%. That's fantastic. But in your letter to the editor, and this is where we had a disagreement last year in one of your letters to the editors, you have not been right with the people that are reading the paper. You have been misleading them. And this is another case where you're telling them that you paid $8,642 taxes on that building, and you did not. You just told me you paid $4,300 and some odd dollars. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The rest of the letter you got is nothing but accusations against a board. You're entitled to your own opinion. But I'd ask if you would please correct this with people in the state of North Dakota, because you letter to the editors in every paper. If you would write another letter and correct what you are misleading them with.
I will not, because that number was given to me by the auditor of Stark County.
Thank you. But you've showed us every tax statement from 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. And you didn't catch that?
I don't understand what your comment is.
You're misleading the public in every letter to the editor that
That's
you have
why I
put out
put
there.
in the letter what tax number to
I
go to
want
to verify it.
proof. And you have seen these papers 100 times over. What is the truth you paid about for taxes on that
What
property?
you pay and what is the actual taxes are two different things.
You say right here, in the year 2013, the taxes were 8,642, which is 202% increase.
That is
But ask the
correct.
public if they would not assume that that's what you paid in taxes on that property. And you're saying, no, I only meant the 4,300.
You're not getting the picture. You're
I'm
not
not-
getting the picture.
The next question under there, or statement, is you ask if you're losing your marbles or is something here wrong here. I'm going to give you the benefit of doubt on the first part, but you are not. There is something wrong here, and it's your numbers that you're giving the public. Thank you.
That's why I went to the county auditor to get the actual tax on the property. That's why it went in the letter. Please contact the auditor.
You got the tax that would have been levied.
That is correct.
Had the state legislature not enacted tax
And the state
relief.
legislature does not guarantee tax relief between now and forever.
Well, of course not.
That could
I mean,
evaporate overnight.
They meet every 2 years, and the city commissions,
But-
and the county, excuse me, the city commission, the county commission, and the school district's budgets aren't the same every year either, nor is the tax base that those budgets are assessed against. It's all variable. But
All I'm saying is that number that I put in there is what is to be divided up among political subdivisions below the state level.
there has been tax relief by the state. You just.
I
right?
understand that. But if
And-
the tax
and when-
relief
and when-
disappears, the taxes are going to be huge.
Well, I think the state has pretty well made a commitment to take on a much larger percentage of funding of school districts, and that's where the tax relief came from. And I, for one, applaud the state legislature for doing that.
Well, I guess, just going
And-
back to my numbers, the school district in Dickinson got a 33% increase from the prior year, even after the, quote, tax relief.
Their budget. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying they took in 33% more in 2013 than they did in 2012 from my property. The county took in 100% more. The city took in 51, almost 52% more.
And that didn't happen to every property, as we.
Why would I be selected then as,
It happened to commercial properties. We had this discussion back in December when you were here, when asked about your personal residence. Property taxes on your personal residence went down, just like most of the personal residences in town this past year. We had a decrease. But commercial properties, because they're behind the assessment process, there haven't been near as many, the residential market turned up years sooner than the commercial market did, so we've seen more increases sooner on residential market. That is now starting to level off, where commercial is still on the upswing, and we have more sales there. It
well,
just
my
stands
point
to
has
reason.
to do with the property at hand, not residential.
That's true. That's true,
Mayor Johnson, if I may.
yes.
There's other ways. It's obvious that the value, assessed value, true and full value, is what you're concerned about this evening. There's other ways to arrive at that figure, and the income approach is one of those ways. That takes out a lot of the guesswork as you're putting forth, or the opinion I've heard you use quite a bit this evening, in creating a true and full value. If you're willing to share the income that you receive from that building with the city assessor, he can then use that figure to arrive at a true and full value. And maybe that's an easier way to come, in this instance, to come to a true and full value.
For the first 7 years, the rent was an even $2,300 a month. For the next 26 years, or 25 years, it was $2,500 a month. For the last 2.5 years, it's $3,000 a month. Now, you have the numbers.
Well, and the easy way to calculate that is you take the monthly rent times the number of months, so 3,000 times 12 is 36,000, and you take that times 10 is 360,000.
What is your cap rate?
I'm just saying that is the general rule of thumb of how you calculate an income assessment against a property.
And I'm certainly not suggesting we have to go through that exercise tonight. All I'm saying, if you want to provide that to the assessor, verify that number, that may be a way to avoid all of the, quote, opinions that you say are made up in the true and full by using comparable buildings.
Well, I guess I thought that information is fairly well known. I guess if he wants it, I can give it to him again.
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
one more issue, Mr. Malberg. In your letters to the editor, you go to certain extents to discredit the school district, the county, park board, and the city, and the state government. I'm not so sure about the credibility that I can get from you. When you mentioned that you haven't received any offer on that building, is that correct?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay, I'm going
I
to give
did
you,
offer it to the UPS, and they turned me down.
Mr. Malberg, I'm going to give you that maybe you haven't received the offer that Mr. Sickler says he gave to his representative to give you for the $950,000. But I did talk to an individual today of that business at 310 when he was boarding a plane in Las Vegas, that he made an offer you of $800,000, and then it was later bumped to $950,000, which kind of coincides with what we would have on the $950,000. So, is my credibility here being damaged, or is it your credibility in telling us that you have never had an offer on that building?
I have never had an offer that was substantially reduced
So
to writing.
substantially is your operative word there.
Numbers fly all the time. I was asked, what would you, and they considered that corner. And I said, well, you have to look at the concept first.
You said you were not offered an offer.
No.
Okay. We'll let the public decide. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for being here. Mr. Colling, what, if we agree with Mr. Malberg's market valuation and would like to do the abatement, what's the proper motion? And if we disagree, what's the proper motion?
Mr. President, if you agree with the application for abatement that Mr. Malberg has made, you would pass a motion to accept the abatement application and value the property at $190,600. If you disagree with the application, you would make a motion to deny the application and to accept the assessor's value of $444,500.
Okay, you've heard the two options before you. I'm just going to refer to them as option 1 and option 2. Would there be a commissioner that would like to move one of those two motions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
move to disapprove the application.
So you're moving option 2?
Second.
Correct.
And we have the second, we have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Olmans?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to move to the timetable agenda. Apologize for being a little late, but we're going to go to the 5 p.m. and we're going to hear the state of the schools. And I think Superintendent Dr. Sullivan is supposed to be here. Oh, there he is behind the podium, Mike. So we'll welcome Mr. Sullivan to the podium, and I will get out of your way.
You don't want to be blinded, Mr. President?
Pardon me?
You don't want to be blinded by the light?
I'm already blinded.
Mr. President, members of the commission, my name is Doug Sullivan. I am the superintendent of the Dickinson Public Schools. I have with me tonight the assistant superintendent, Mr. Vince Reap, and if with your permission, Mr. President, he'll be providing part of this presentation. We know that infrastructure is a big issue in western North Dakota currently. We read the articles in the newspaper about the challenges the commission is facing, the challenges that are being faced in northwest North Dakota. Well, infrastructure is a big issue for the Dickinson Public Schools also. And so I thought I would come and visit with the commission about the efforts in the school district and what the school district is attempting to do to properly position itself for the future with the facility master planning process with the DLR group. It was in July of last calendar year that the school board approved contracting with a consultant. And these are basically the three main goals that we have with this facility master planning process: to inform our stakeholders of the investment in the school district, to advise the stakeholders of some of the successes and some of the struggles we're having, gather information from our stakeholders, and encourage our stakeholders to participate. To date, the school district has conducted 2 community forums to provide an opportunity for community input into the long-range facility planning process. Our 3rd community forum is currently scheduled for March 20th at 7 p.m. in the Hagen Gymnasium. And part of my purpose for being here this evening is to invite each and every one of you and everybody that's present in the room to attend that meeting. One of the things we talk about in the school district is our student mobility. And these are the number of students who transfer in and out of the school district. You can see that in 2011 and 12, we had 960 students that either transferred in or out of the school district. And 2012 and 13, we had 1,078. Over 33% of the students in the Dickinson Public Schools for the last 2 years that we have records for, we don't have records for this year yet, but of the previous 2 years, over 33% of our students have been mobile. This creates some huge and very significant demands on the school district in terms of services and meeting the educational needs of all these students. We have students coming from virtually every state in our nation. The only one I don't think I've seen so far has been Hawaii, but I don't know how many oil workers live in Hawaii. But so this has been a very significant challenge for the school district. This is the school district's population at this time. In January of 2014, we were at 3191. In March of 2014, we're now at 3199. We have not yet hit a record in the school district. The record in the school district was actually back in the 80s when we had a little over 3,200 students in the school district. And in the school district in the last 5 years, since May of 2009, we have enrolled 646 K-6 students in the Dickinson Public Schools. In May of 2009, the number 646 is virtually equal to the enrollment of Hart River, Berg, and Jefferson Elementaries. So that's the kind of gives you a little perspective on the magnitude of the growth that we've experienced in the school district. So what has the school district done aside from hiring this consultant to help us with our long-range facility planning process? We have added 44,000 square feet of additions in K-5 since 2003. We added 7 classrooms onto Lincoln Elementary in 2011 and 4 classrooms onto Jefferson Elementary in 2011. Prairie Rose came online this fall and added 58,000 square feet of additional classroom space for grades K to 5. We've added 102,000 square feet of classroom space in the last 10 years. Currently, our average class size in the school district is approximately, for grades K to 5, is approximately 23 to 1. If we had not added that 102,000 square feet of classroom space, our average class size in K-5 would now be 35 to 1. And we all know what the terminology average means. It means that there are some less than 35 and some more than 35. And so we would have some classes that would be over 35 students per classroom in our grades K to 5. One of the things we do in the school district to keep track of our projected enrollment is the assistant superintendent works very closely with St. Joseph's to track live birth rates. And then using a ratio of those rates that the school district has tracked for approximately 2 decades, we can estimate the number of students that we will have in our kindergarten class in 5 years. The current enrollment in the Dickinson Public Schools in kindergarten is 306 at this time. If you take a look at the St. Joe's live birth, you can see that they have been having record years for the last 4 consecutive years. In 2013, I believe the number was 538 live births at St. Joseph's. If we take those live births and use the ratio and our conversion factor, in 2017, the kindergarten class in the Dickinson Public School District is estimated at 380 students. And in 2018, 1 year later, it will be 438 students. And now what I would like for you to do is roll those students forward with the 3 classes behind them 12 years, when this class might be seniors at Dickinson High School, followed by 3 more classes of 400, and Dickinson High School is a school of 1,600 to 1,800 students. These are some of the challenges that we're trying to address through our long-range facility planning process that I thought might interest the Commission and the audience tonight. And we're very hopeful that this process will not just position the school district for the next 5 years, but hopefully for the next 25 to 30 years. And so just how old are the schools? If you exclude Prairie Rose from the average calculation, our school's average age is 61 years old in the Dickinson Public Schools. The oldest building in the school district is Roosevelt Elementary. That was built in 1920. Ms. Dukehart, you'll be happy to know that in 1920 you got the right to vote. And it was also the year that the Red Sox sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees. Roosevelt Elementary was built in 1935, which just happens to be the year that Babe Ruth hits his last home run for the Yankees. Dickinson High School will be 50 years old in 2018, and one of the things we know about our schools is that many of them are not constructed for the types of instructional practices that are expected in a 21st century learning environment. And so where will all enrollment go, Mr. President? I'd like to have the Assistant Superintendent take this piece.
one of the things that we know is we're growing right now, and so we have to predict how fast and how many will come. And one of the models that we're using is just very basic. We're just simply rolling all of the students ahead 1 year. We apply retention factors for kindergarten, and then I look at the numbers that we have for live births and other factors and plug in the number of kindergarten students. And as you can see with this model, we do okay, especially in the K-6 arena. Right now with extra class space at Prairie Rose, the way it was designed, we'll be okay in K-6 until we get to about 2,250 students. We think Hagan Junior High will be stressed when it hits 550. And so in 2017, there's going to be an issue. Same is true with Dickinson High School. As you roll those students forward, we still have some room to grow in those schools. However, we know that just rolling students forward and saying no new students are coming in probably isn't reflective of what's happened in the last few years. Mr. Kessel.
Mr. Reap, I just have a question for you. When you're using the Model 1, are you using a 23-to-1 ratio, or is that ratio expand as the student numbers expand?
Well, we don't actually use any of those ratios. As an example, next fall, with looking at where we're projected to go, we will be adding 12 to 13 new sections of teachers. And so we'll keep the ratios fairly close to that. But when we look at the model that'll max us out, those ratios will grow. Hope that answers. Okay. Looking at Model 2, we use a combination of factors, including the studies that NDSU did for the city on population, student mobility factors, birth rates, rolling grades forward, and we combine all of that in addition to the study that NDSU did for some of the school districts in the oil patch, Dickinson Public being one of them. And we see with a 7% inward migration factor applied to our K-6 buildings and a 4% applied to 7 and 8, 9, 12, we certainly pick up a lot more stress in Model 2. We see that in the fall of 2016, our 7th and 8th grade building, Hagan Junior High, is at its capacity. And our K through 6 buildings have gone by that maybe in the 2016, but certainly by 2017. Dickinson High School probably is literally hitting their maximum at 1,036. And so last year, as Dr. Sullivan probably mentioned, our inward migration was 11%. Last summer was a statistical anomaly for us. But even putting it at 7 and using 4 in the upper grades, we feel that these numbers are pretty reflective of where we think we might be.
Well, just a couple more comments about this slide. The assistant superintendent has clearly illuminated the challenges in 2016 and 17. And you've probably all, you may remember the movie with George Clooney, The Perfect Storm, where these 3 storms converge on northeast Maine all at the same time. That's largely what we're faced with in the school district with the enrollment that's going to hit the school district with our projections in 2016 and 2017. So we have some challenges ahead of us, and the school district is already working on those challenges, not only through the long-range facility planning process, but taking a look at other alternatives. And so this is the perfect storm that's facing us in about the next 3.5 years. And so what can we do? Again, I would like to invite everybody in this room and anybody who may watch this on television to Hagan Junior High School on March 20th at 7 p.m. This is one of the most critical decisions this school district has faced in a long time. It is vitally important for the future of the public schools in the state, or in the community. And so, I'll just conclude by saying that I know infrastructure is something that the Commission is interested in. I hope you found this information to be informative and understand a little bit more about what the school district is attempting to do to position itself for the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, and Mr. Reap, you certainly have some significant challenges ahead of you. Would you take some questions?
Absolutely.
I know you're not yet committed to a particular building plan, or maybe even a particular model, but you would have some idea of the possible cost impact to deal with this situation. Can you give us a sense of the magnitude of the dollars we could be talking about?
One of the things that they talked about at the second forum was if we move forward, depending on what the public input is for what we should look like, how much would we as individuals be willing to come forth with on a monthly basis for a tax initiative, as they called it. We haven't gotten to that point. In fact, Mr. Kessel sent me an email wondering if this forum will be the same as the last one, and it will not. It will expand upon that, and I think we'll, at that point, Mr. Mayor, we'll talk about how much funding will be necessary for whatever plan the DLR group brings to the board. And that decision won't happen until April or May.
Is it fair to say it's likely to be a fairly significant capital number? I mean,
absolutely.
Because you're dealing with, look to me like, depending upon which model you went with, you could, your middle school and your high school both would have problems in terms of capacity, student capacity, before the elementary schools. And of course, middle schools and high schools are very expensive to build.
Absolutely.
They require quite a bit more land and quite a bit more, I guess, other things with them besides just classroom space.
We would agree with that assessment. The one thing that we don't want to do is to put the money before the plan.
Right. Now, you know, we hear about the Watford City issues and the Williston issues, and you probably know these numbers better than I do, but I think I've read where Williston has like 52 portable classrooms in their school district.
That's the number I've heard.
And how many do we have in the Dickinson School District?
We have 0.
Well, you know, just as one citizen, I'd like to see you keep it at 0 because, you know, we talk a lot about quality of place, quality of life here, and I think one of the great things we have going for us in this community is we have 2 excellent school systems, and we don't have portable classrooms. And when it comes to attracting and retaining families, I think that's a huge advantage that our community has.
Absolutely.
Other comments or questions?
I guess I just have a couple of comments. One, thank you for this presentation, and I have seen this at a couple of the service organizations in town. So you are definitely getting feet out on the ground and raising the public awareness. So kudos to you on that. From a school district standpoint, it's my impression that you're not sitting on any available land right now for future school expansion. Can you clarify that, or is that true, or?
Commissioner Altmans, that would be correct. The last acreage that the school district had available was utilized for Prairie Rose.
That's what I thought. Now, in our master plan, in our 2035 plan, as we've worked with developers, we have, as a commission and as a community developer, we have requested or tried to set aside land for future schools in some form or fashion. Am I off base or on base on that?
Yes and no. We haven't specifically cited areas that we would do. I'll be talking a little bit later about our West Dickinson sub-area plan, and with that, one of the elements would be a potential site going further to the west. Nevertheless, whenever we have a development, though, we contact, if I recall right, I believe we submit all of our proposals to the school district and for them to be able to comment, and we also work with the developers on a larger project with respect to that. So it may not be specifically addressed in there, but we do that as part of the development process. Commissioner Oltmans.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Sullivan.
just to provide a little bit more clarification, Commissioner Oltmans, we do work very closely with the Parks and Rec on future developments and the potential for school sites in those developments, and they have put us in touch with developers, and so we have conversations with developers about potential school sites. So we have a very good relationship with the city in trying to make sure the school district is properly positioned in terms of acreage for facilities.
And that would be my hope too, is that we don't, that as a school district, you're not in a compromised position bidding on land that's escalating in price. I would hope that we're all working together to try to come up with some common ground so that you feel comfortable in the value that you're buying into for school expansion too.
Mr. Kessel.
I didn't have the opportunity to attend your second public information forum. I commend you for the way that was run. I thought it was done excellent. Your consultant did a great job of facilitating that meeting. What I really walked away with and what you've presented this evening is you've got a problem as early as 2016. We are building buildings in the city. It's difficult to do a building with our construction timeframes in 2 years, from design to opening. And so certainly I commend you for going through this process now, and I just wanted to underline or underscore the importance of these public meetings, because you really have to do something. What I took away is you really have to do something very, very soon to deal with these issues. Would that be correct?
Mr. President? Mr. Kessel, that would be correct. The school district, we know that we're going to be fine next year unless something extremely unusual happens to the tune of 20 to 25%. But if we get hit with another 11%, we'll be all right. It'll be tight. And some of the spaces that we now utilize for auxiliary programs will go away. But we know that we can address the space needs for the school district for 14-15. Beyond that, it gets a little bit more dicey.
I understand, with the recent fire at Trinity's school, that you've also been in talks with them of how to help kind of facilitate through the rest of this school year as well, if need be.
Mr. President? Commissioner Oltmans, that's correct. The tragedy that happened at Trinity, it's probably one of the worst things that a school's administrator could ever think of, because you're suddenly faced with trying to find a new home for the students who need an education. And so we are in discussions with Trinity. We had a meeting. We went and attended their school board meeting this afternoon today, and have told them what there are in terms of options for the Dickinson Public Schools to assist. And we will be meeting with them, I would suspect, every day this week to try and get their children back in school next week.
And they have called off classes for the rest of this week, and there's a parent forum on Wednesday morning at Queen of Peace Church, is what I understand as well.
Superintendent Sullivan, I already told you I'm going to be in Houston on the 20th. What are you actually asking for in this forum? Can I send you some emails, some ideas that I have? Or what do you want from the public is what I'm saying.
I think the main thing that we want from the public is active engagement and honest comments, honest conversation about what they want for their public school system in the next 20 to 25 years. And we are open to all suggestions, and it has been interesting to be in these two meetings, the first two meetings, to see some of the comments and some of the suggestions that have come out, because one of the things that we believe in the Dickinson Public Schools is that we're smarter collectively than we are individually. And so the more people that can participate, be engaged and actively engaged in this process, the better solution that will be configured for the school district. And so, Commissioner Dukart, yes, if you have suggestions, please email those to me, and those are forwarded to the consultant.
Okay, thank
So
you.
the homework assignment for everyone is come prepared to discuss the issues that we're facing moving forward?
That is it.
All right.
Well, Dr. Sullivan, as you pointed out, since 2011, you've added 102,000 square feet of classroom space. I want to commend you on the vision that your board and your management had in doing that. You got out in front of what was coming, and I'm particularly impressed that you did that without any state oil impact money, and you did it without a bond issue. You've been good stewards of the taxpayers' dollar, and I just want to commend and congratulate you on that accomplishment. And to date, I think I know this, that really you've received as a district very little in state oil impact money.
That would be accurate,
That'd
Mr.
be-
President.
Yeah, so, and the numbers, while you were very politically careful in disclosing what you think this could cost, I'm sure we're facing some pretty significant challenges, so we'll have more reasons to talk to the legislature this next session than the reasons we had 2 years ago, so.
I think, Mr. President, I do think that the legislature needs to be engaged in this issue of funding public schools. We know that infrastructure at this point, the legislature has defined that as roads and bridges, sewer systems, things of that nature. So far, public schools do not have access to a grant program that would help offset taxes at the local level. Everything that's available to the public schools at this point is largely a loan program, a low-interest loan program, but we all know what has to happen with a loan. It has to be repaid. And so hopefully the legislature will take a different view of schools and how they fit into the infrastructure of our state.
Well, I think one of the big factors here is that the growth has come so fast, whether it's growth in property values, growth in city infrastructure needs, or growth in school buildings. The impact is so quick. It's not like it's happening over a 15, 20-year period of time. It's happening, in some cases, in a matter of months, but certainly in just a handful of years.
Yeah, and I think that the assistant superintendent tried to, and he did a pretty good job of illuminating that. We thought last summer that we were pretty well positioned and everything was going fine. And then the middle of July hit, and they started coming in droves. And there's been an odd anomaly in the school district this year, is that it hasn't stopped. You know, we just enrolled some folks today from West Virginia who moves to North Dakota in the middle of the winter from West Virginia. And they've come from all over the state, and this enrollment has not stopped. And so it has been very dramatic for us this year.
Well, there's so much economic opportunity within the Bakken, and especially here now in the Dickinson area. Much more economic opportunity than exists in other parts of our nation. So
And
it's different
Superintendent-
times.
Excuse me. You know, I think you were at the meeting last week when the MDU was, they were our speakers, when they said we only have hired 25 out of 90 employees. We are getting called all the time for families that have to be here by October 1st, so I think you're going to see a lot more for enrollment.
And, Mr. President, if I may, one more comment. Commissioner Dukart, just for the information of everybody in the room and the audience, one of the steps that we have had to take that we found necessary is that for next school year, open enrollment in the Dickinson Public Schools is closed for all grades K through 12. You know, it's difficult for us to justify bringing students from outside of the school district when we're facing some of the numbers that we hope to illuminate our challenges to the commission tonight.
Well, you have a big job. We're happy we're on the city commission rather than the school board, so.
Well, I'm happy I'm not on the city commission. So, we can both go home and be happy, and
There
thank
you
you
go.
so much for your time.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
both for being here. Okay, we're all the way down to 5:15 timetable, and that's the State Avenue overpass alignment and Palm Beach Road access. We have Todd Lang here, and did you want to say anything else, Mr. Engineer, in the way of introduction?
I can give a quick introduction. Todd Lang is with HDR, as you said, the consultant hired by the DOT to design the State Avenue grade separation. Back in October, the commission had made some recommendations to the city, or to the DOT, to finalize the PCR, or the project concept report, the environmental document for this project. Since that time, we've had several discussions, mostly related to access. And to formalize the discussions we've had, the DOT is preparing with HDR an addendum to the PCR. So there'll be 4 questions posed tonight that will constitute this PCR addendum. We'd like to get a recommendation or a decision on those 4 items, which will be forwarded to the DOT as a recommendation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Todd, who has a short presentation on the project.
And we'll get out of your way here.
Mr. President, City Commissioners, as Craig said, my name is Todd Lang. I'm with HDR Engineering, and we are the consultant under contract with the DOT to work on the State Avenue grade separation. Give you a quick update on the project and present the questions that Craig alluded to concerning some final decisions that need to be made so we can go forward with the project. I'm going to give you a quick overview, but in the interest of being respectful of your time, I'm going to step through it pretty quickly. If you do have questions, please stop me. I'm going to review the process and schedule real quick, talk about some of the decisions we've already made, and then we'll talk about the options that we still need to get decisions made on and that North Dakota DOT is seeking your recommendations on. HDR's been under contract for about a year now. We got through the phase 1 of the project, with the exception of these couple of decisions that are still hanging out there. The original PCR was signed back at the end of October, and when that was signed, there was the question of access options that we were directed to go back and further investigate, see if we couldn't find a better solution for. Since that time, we've been working on additional solutions and also starting final design activities when we could, and still looking at trying to start construction here in 2014. There's been quite a bit of public outreach on the project. We've had meetings with business owners. We've had a public input meeting back in August, an additional neighborhood meeting in December, and look forward to having a public information meeting hopefully this spring, early summer, to present the final design when it goes forward. Also know that you folks have discussed this in several of your meetings and had a great deal of feedback from the public in a couple of your meetings as well. So at a high level, the alternatives that have been developed that were looked at in that environmental document were a no-build alternative, an overpass alternative, and an underpass alternative. However, the underpass alternative was eliminated due to design constraints and cost. Some of the decisions that were made in that PCR, we looked at constructing either on an existing alignment or on an offset alignment, and at that time the offset alignment was selected. Some additional design options that were looked at. We looked at several typical sections for State Avenue in the constructed condition, and one of the decisions that was made at that time was that we would not be providing a median anywhere along State Avenue for the project. We also looked at different ways to reconnect Broadway. The overpass structure will span State Avenue over Broadway Street, and therefore Broadway will have to be reconnected with State Avenue, and an option for that was selected. As I mentioned earlier, the question of some business access that needed to be reestablished was put off and asked to be studied further as part of that original PCR. And lastly, there was an access option for Palm Beach Road, a decision that was made as part of that PCR, but as I'll explain later, that decision is being revisited a little bit in this current addendum to the PCR. So when we look at options, some of the things we look at estimated construction costs. We try to document the engineering advantages and disadvantages of the constructed option. We look for environmental impacts, and for better or worse, there really isn't a whole lot of environmental impacts that lead any of these options one way or the other. The environmental impacts seem to be pretty equal among the options that we're talking about here, so that really hasn't been a decider in many of the decisions in this particular project. We also look at right-of-way and business impacts, which have had an impact, and we'll discuss a little bit. And of course, the city and public input, as we're seeking tonight and have been throughout the project. So real quick, to refresh you with the options that were put forward back in October, there was an option 1. See if I can get the pointer to work here. Really, the businesses in question here are the Breakforth Bible Church, the UPS building, that are losing access in a lot of these options because of the grade separation starting to climb to get over the railroad tracks. And so we're looking at options to either put back their access or reestablish their access somewhere else. And this was option 1 previously. Option 2 had a lot of impacts. It required several relocations by constructing a frontage road to get back there. Option 3 wasn't much better. Still impacted the Pizza Hut property quite a bit, and also called for the UPS property to be relocated because access would not be reestablished. Lastly, option 4 was an option where access back to the church and the UPS was simply not reestablished, and these two properties would have both been relocations. And as you noted there's a lot of impacts, a lot of relocations in these options, and that's why we were tasked with going back and looking for some other options. Option 5, which I believe you folks discussed a few weeks ago in your commission meeting, it involved extending Hollywood Boulevard and cutting across to the west and getting back to UPS by going underneath the new bridge that's being proposed and connecting them up here. It also involved taking some property, purchasing some property from the current Pizza Hut building and establishing an access to the church here. One of the disadvantages of this was the impact to this residential owner's side yard. So we also looked at another option where we adjusted this slightly, got a lot closer to the Dickinson Ready Mix fabrication building here, but did avoid this neighbor's side yard, or this homeowner's side yard. And then there was a third option 5, option 5B, which involved, rather than coming through the Pizza Hut property, it involved something similar to the option 1, where there was a backage road that reestablished the access to the church. And then, as I mentioned before, UPS would get their access from the extended Hollywood Boulevard. So, again, still some options, or still some impacts, and while these options were being considered, it became evident to us that no clear favorite was coming to the surface. I believe you guys had a split vote a few weeks ago on some of these options. And also it became evident to us that one of the goals that we had originally set forth for the project of having this built in 2014 was starting to slip away from us. You know, and so because of that, we were asked to look at something that was dismissed earlier, and that was the realignment of this industrial rail spur. Earlier on in the PCR process, the realignment of that spur was discounted set aside because it definitely had some impacts to construction schedule and some impacts to costs. So it had been discounted at that time, but because of the changes in schedule, we were asked to go back and look at that again, and we did put together an alternative that would have that current spur that goes into Dickinson Ready Mix become realigned. You can see that green line through here, and then cut up and service their loader facility over here. And what that does for us is it shortens the bridge, and it gives us an opportunity to start to drop the profile sooner than we had been. And what you'll see is that by doing that, and also reducing some of our vertical curve lengths, what we're able to do is get down in time to tie First Street back in, and also to put back an access right here, basically near the property line between the UPS and the church buildings, and give them a drive right off of State as they currently have. So this is one of the two new options that came out of that additional investigation, calling that option 6A. And some of the advantages and disadvantages of option 6A, it's the least expensive. It requires no relocations, and it requires a lot less changes to the current access patterns. It reestablishes the intersection with First Street, and the UPS and the church still have a driveway right off of State Avenue. Some of the disadvantages, the spur realignment does add time to the construction schedule, and also we do have some shorter vertical curves. So maybe not quite the design that we had before, but these designs do still meet the design standards. The other option that's come out of this additional research is the option 6B, and really it's all things similar, but in addition to looking at realigning the spur again, we've also looked at going back to an on-existing alignment. And that has the advantage of retaining the existing straight alignment. Unfortunately, that has a disadvantage of requiring some temporary bypass, temporary railroad signals and gates, and therefore adding some cost and schedule risk to the project. Any questions about the business access options? Okay, I'll move on then to Palm Beach Road. As I mentioned, there was a selected alternative for Palm Beach Road in the PCR, and that was option P1. If you folks remember when I was here in October, option P1 is not the alternative that you put forth as your recommended alternative. It's the one case in which the DOT didn't go along with your recommendations. And I believe a lot of that had to do with the cost. But since that time, since we are doing an addendum to the PCR, I think it's been requested that we look at this some more. And so I've got a couple of new options to present to you concerning Palm Beach Road. Just briefly, the advantages that the P1 alternative that was selected previously had were that it was the lowest cost and required the least right-of-way acquisitions. But it didn't have a direct access to State. Currently, Palm Beach Road connects in right here with State, and that won't be able to be the case anymore because State Avenue will still be up too high at this point. So what this looked at was connecting it to Broadway rather than State, which was seen as a disadvantage. Yes, sir.
So under this, you'd have to go up to West Broadway, hang a right, and come back to State Avenue?
Yeah, so any folks coming from Palm Beach Road under this option would have to take Broadway, take the new Broadway connection, and then be on State. So a little bit of a circuitous route for them to get onto State. And that's the advantage we noted. Well, it was one of several that we put forth in the original PCR. Okay. Sorry, sir. So, the options that we've brought forward tonight. One we're calling P2 revised. This is very similar to what was called P2 in the original PCR. But at that time, this took more of a curve back to Palm Beach Road, came in more perpendicular. And that really had the disadvantage of creating a remnant property here that really would have had to have been purchased from the old clay plant, but really wouldn't have been used for much. So what we've done here is revised it to follow the property line and kind of reduce the amount of right-of-way that needs to be taken from the old clay plant. Some advantages of this: it does provide that direct access to State Avenue. Some disadvantages are it's the highest cost option and requires the most right-of-way acquisition. So then the third option is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's what we're calling option P5. And this option comes off of where Palm Beach Road currently connects to State and circles back parallel to State for a bit. And then it'll come in right across from where the Broadway connection will have an intersection with State. So creating kind of a full four-way intersection here. Some advantages of that: it does create that direct access to State Avenue. It's also a lot less expensive than P2, and when paired with option 6B that I discussed earlier, it requires less right-of-way acquisition than P2. The one disadvantage is that if it's not paired with P2, it does require quite a bit of right-of-way, almost as much as P2. Any questions about the Palm Beach Road access? Lastly, the other decision, or the other question that's being put forward in the PCR addendum and the DOT is asking for your recommendations on, concerns the State Avenue access for the medicine shop and the American Welding and Gas building. And those properties are right here, the medicine shop pharmacy and the American Welding and Gas business. Currently, they have driveways right off of State right here. And these driveways are within the desirable 300 feet that you would want to have a driveway be away from an intersection. So we've put forward this question because really the desirable thing to do from an access management standpoint would be to close these drives. But wanted to get your input on them. And the questions before you concern allowing them to be right-out only, both of them, allowing only the medicine shop to be right-out only, are closing direct access to State for both of them. One thing I do want to point out that they both have access to other streets. The medicine shop has access to Villard here, and American Welding and Gas has access to First Street here. And in the option 6 options, they'll actually have pretty readily available access to State by way of First Street if that intersection is kept in the option 6 option, or option 6 options. So there are the three questions. Craig, did you want to provide any input from the city or staff recommendations at this point, or?
Well, I think through the last discussion that we had at a commission meeting, the option on the screen right now about what we were calling the business access options, I believe that the commission had decided upon option 6. At the time, we didn't have a 6A and a 6B. And through discussions with HDR and visiting with staff, I would recommend option 6B. The largest or the greatest benefit of realigning, which was originally chosen, was for ease of construction to help traffic move through the project more quickly. Like Todd had mentioned, we no longer will have the constraints of one construction season. This project will spill over into 2015 construction. So I think there's benefit in keeping the alignment where State Avenue is today, especially from some right-of-way impacts. I think the DOT would like a motion similar to how we did in October on each of these decisions. So if we want to do one at a time.
Can we go through all 4 questions, hear your recommendation before we ask for motions, then we'll go back and take individual one?
We sure can. Well, the next question would be involving the Palm Beach Road access. Again, P1 was the option that was selected originally by the DOT. An option similar to P2, but involving quite a bit more right-of-way impacts, was recommended by the commission back in October. And then P5 is the new, oh, excuse me, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Yeah, P5 is the option on the north side of the clay plant. I've looked at the profiles of both of these alignments, and I believe that P5 makes a fairly direct connection and would be a recommendation of option P5 based on some right-of-way impacts and the grade line and profile of that access. And then the third question.
I have a question about this one, though.
Okay.
In reading the materials, is this the option that the state DOT would not pay the increased cost on? The increased cost would go to the city if we choose that?
There was some discussion on that, and I believe that was just relating to option P2 revised.
So P5, there would be no additional cost to the city?
That's correct, President Johnson. In a discussion with Mr. Salway from the DOT, if we chose the south route, and I noticed you have on both these options south.
I apologize for that, yeah. P5 is actually to the north of the old clay plant. I apologize for that typo.
So P2, which would have the southbound, or the south road, south of the clay plant, the DOT said there'll be an additional cost of $700,000, and they would look for somebody to pick that cost up. That the DOT, if we chose to endorse that, they would not pay the cost of construction for that option.
All right.
Then the last decision was the business access options to American Welding and Gas and to the medicine shop. I believe, while it is less than 300 feet from the Villard intersection, the accesses are there today. One of the businesses, the medicine shop, has a drive-through involved with their access. So there's been some discussion at past meetings about that access. I believe that access could function as a right out for the medicine shop, but that would involve some work rearranging their drive-through operations. Right now, the vehicles come in off of State Avenue. We would be asking them to make a right out only. And I don't know if that will be an agreeable choice for the landowner or for the business owner.
Because then you have a dairy barn. If you've ever driven through the dairy barn, you go through you're on the opposite side of the window is basically.
Correct. You'd be going clockwise around the building instead of counterclockwise. The thought being that a pneumatic tube similar to
Sure.
a bank would be installed then.
Sure.
And Mr. Lang, do you know, would those costs, that rearrangement for the medicine shop, would that work be included in the project itself?
I don't know the answer to that at this time.
Okay.
I foresee that being part of right-of-way negotiations.
Okay.
Mr. President, I have a question. Currently, does the medicine shop drive-through, do the customers access it from the west going east, and then they would distribute the medicine through a window to the passenger side? Or?
They do come from the west to the east, so that would put the driver at the building side. What we would be asking them is to go from the east to the west putting the driver away from the building.
Going west to east would put it on the passenger side, not. Do they service
we
out
can-
of the south side of that building? You drive it, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So you serve to the passenger side right now. Going with the right design, you would actually serve to the driver's side. No?
No, opposite. Opposite.
They
Think of
currently
Dairy Barn.
come-
Other way around.
currently come in here, and the driver's window is right up against the south side of the building, and then exit here. Under this, they would have to come in from Villard, come here, receive their prescriptions through a pneumatic tube, and then exit out there.
But you probably had some people coming from the west going east and get it through the passenger side. All right, thank you.
So on this one, what's your recommendation as far as the option 1, 2, or 3?
Well, from an engineering standpoint, I would feel comfortable with the right out for the medicine shop. Again, I have not visited with that business owner at all, so I don't know if that's going to be an agreeable solution to them.
I did have a brief conversation with that business owner, and he is not excited about that option, the pneumatic tube option.
Are these options open to discussion?
Who asked the question?
I asked the question.
Okay, why don't you come to the podium and state your name and ask your question, and
My name is Jim Peters. I live on Palm Beach Road. I actually have a number of questions if I had a chance. But in talking about the medicine shop, for instance, as it is right now, people turn in from the a right on or right off, whatever you call that, as they're going north on States. And for some reason, apparently that won't happen any longer. I don't know why. The same thing for the gas place there. They can turn in on a right off of States Avenue also right now. The access that we will have, I live on Palm Beach Road, and the access place is probably the last option, looks about the best for that. The other, may I ask another question about this whole project?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the actual spur rail road there, or the spur rail that was put in, has caused an increase in the use of States Avenue at any time. I am wondering why that spur couldn't be put out on the west end, where the spur, there's another spur out there now that brings sand and whatever in for the fracking outfit that's placed in there, and would then completely eliminate the spur as it is, and should help on improving that overpass that they're talking about.
Does anyone here know, or have an answer to the spur location issue? Mr. Kubas?
The information that I could provide you with is that the Ready Mix owns that spur. That's part of their business. And so, you know, we've consulted with Dickinson Ready Mix on the relocation of the spur line. I don't know how that would work, doing what Mr. Peters has suggested about moving it further west.
And you're suggesting that it wouldn't even cross states then, is that what you're saying?
Well, we could eliminate the crossing of states if they went out to the west of the area we're talking about, where the spur line already comes in off the main line in to feed right next to the Dickinson Ready Mix.
I guess my assumption would be, and I could be wrong on this, but that the cars that service Dickinson Ready Mix, I would assume that they're being decoupled from the train on the east side of States and brought back across.
Well,
wouldn't that be how the railroad handles that?
yes, they'll come in with 40 or 50 cars crossing across there, and then leave them and then take their engine and whatever cars they have out of there and leave that number of cars in there.
Right, but I mean, they can't decouple those, whatever the number of cars it would be, west of States. They don't have a rail yard there.
Well, they don't right now, but, excuse me, there is a rail coming in from west of States. It comes into the fracking area. And I'm only saying, why didn't they use that spur to go to where they are?
Well, I would assume that's not the railroads, but I don't, does
Well,
anybody here know, Mr. Sickler, you represent, do you know the answer to that?
I do not.
Okay. I'm just assuming again that the railroad, because all their other tracks for, you know, changing cars in and out are, their parallel tracks are east of States Avenue.
Well, their yard, so to speak, is south of the main line. West of, I want to say west of Dickinson city limits is where they have another spur that comes from west to east, and I don't understand why they couldn't come in there with the line into the Dickinson Ready Mix instead of crossing States Avenue.
You know, Mr. Lang has been living this project for a long time. Maybe you know the answer.
Mr. President, yeah. There is another siding, a spur coming off of the main line west of the area we're talking about, but that does not belong to Dickinson Ready Mix. I believe it services the rock pile corporation there.
Okay.
We discussed a little bit with Dickinson Ready Mix early on, the viability of them using that even temporarily, and it sounded like it was going to be something that even temporarily to use would be quite an undertaking because of the busyness of those spurs, that spur belonging to rock piles. So there is a second spur, I believe. It's the spur that the gentleman is talking about, but it does not belong to Dickinson Ready Mix.
And it doesn't belong to Burlington Northern?
And it doesn't belong to Burlington Northern.
Okay. I think that's your answer.
It doesn't sound like an answer to me.
Well, you know, if Dickinson Ready Mix owns their line, another company owns the other line, we've seen what a nightmare it is just logistically to get our right-of-ways and to get our water line to go under the existing railroad tracks. It was an act of God to get that to go through. And essentially what you're asking for is two neighbors each have a driveway, and you're wondering why this neighbor can't park all of his cars in the other guy's driveway. It's
no.
two separate. They don't have any right-of-way. They don't have any access to it. And so you're asking an additional owner to give them full longitude on that, and that's not going to happen.
They don't park their cars in the same place. It's access to those places that could be shared by both.
Okay, well, I don't think we have any other answers for
Yeah,
you.
we have no authority over that either. So.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Jackson.
not sure where you want to go with this.
Well, I'd sure like to hear your opinions on these options since
Well,
you're a professional engineer.
I tend to agree with the recommendations of Mr. Kubis. You know, the one that, we've got two issues here that are more neighborhood related, but obviously the 6A and 6B issue affects the whole community, and either will work. We'll have a good overpass with either one. I think that 6B will give us a little bit better overpass, being on the State Avenue alignment. It's going to make life a little more difficult for Mr. Lang and for the DOT and for a contractor. And it is going to make the project a longer project. But I think that the pain, if you want to call it that we suffer as a community, short term, is well worth the gain that we'll have long term. So when you're ready for a motion.
Well, why don't you share with us your opinions on all the options, because I think the other commissioners would like to hear your opinion.
I really didn't like the option what was the early option for Palm Beach Road?
Can you put those back up?
Sure.
This was
P1.
P1,
Yeah.
there's revised P2, and then P5.
I just think P1 is too much inconvenience to put on the folks on Palm Beach Road. I think that either P2 or P5 can work fine. I see no reason to use the option to the south side of the clay plant. I think the one to the north side will work just fine. Just fine. The medicine shop issue is a difficult one. In my mind, there shouldn't be an issue with, help me, what's the business to the south of the medicine
American
shop?
Gas.
Yeah, American Gas. Their ability now to use First Street, I think, takes that issue away. And I don't think they need access off of States Avenue directly into what I believe is an alley or driveway there. Medicine shop issue is a tough one. I think it's better for traffic flow if we don't allow any right-in, but in light of the circumstances, I think we should do that. I think we should do that if the medicine shop still requests that that be done. I'd hate to do it, build it, and then not have the medicine shop use it. So I think we need to make sure that they want at least that. I know they won't be happy with only that, but
And that's option 2?
I believe that's 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a fourth question? I got
I
3.
thought you said 4.
The fourth question is a standard question that's on every environmental document, is saying, do you concur with the project concepts as proposed? So if not, the other 3 questions don't really apply anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Jackson, yes, we're ready for a motion.
Do we need to formally address?
Each one?
I think they would like that, but it could be done in the form of one motion.
Okay.
Do them all in one motion? Are we comfortable with that?
Are we comfortable with that, Mr. Colling?
Mr. President, Commissioners, if you have the motions or the options in mind, they can all be included within one motion to express the sense of the commission.
Okay, well, I will move that on question 1, that we answer the DOT yes. On question 2, that we choose option 6B. On question 3 regarding Palm Beach Road, that we choose option P5, I believe it is, to the north. And on the access question, that we use option 2, or II.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
We have the second by Mrs. Stuckert. Further discussion? I just want to clarify the option 2 or option II, or not, excuse me, the P5 option, that is no additional cost to the city.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Again, I just hope that we can confirm with the medicine shop that they will in fact use that. That right out.
See, there's an acknowledgement in the audience. No?
I'm not saying that has to be done tonight. I just,
Other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson? Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We're now down to 5:30, and that's the sewer rate study. We have from Apex, Carla Olson. And did you bring Mr. Berg with you? Okay, so we have Ms. Olson here to, do you have slides?
I do. Yes, sir.
Would it be okay if should we take just a 5-minute safety break?
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll go.